Hello everyone, I'm History with Hilbert, and this is my The Last Kingdom Season 2 predictions. So I'm going to be predicting what I think is going to happen in Season 2. Now it's not going to be very spoilery because this is just looking at the history of what happens after the period in Season 1 rather than, reading ahead and seeing what actually happens in the series because I don't know until it's aired. So it's going to be aired on the 16th of March, and I'm very excited for this to come. I really enjoyed Season 1, so I'm very excited to see where the producers are going to take the series in this second season. Now, first of all, let's recap what goes on in Season 1. So we have basically the arrival of the Great Heathen Army in England, and the season actually starts with the invasion of Northumberland in 866 AD and the Battle of Aerfawich, or what is now known as York, where Uhtred's father dies, and he's then captured by the Danes. Now the Great Heathen Army goes on to invade several regions until they are stopped at Ashdown, or Assendum, as it was called in Old English. And this is the battle where Uhtred and Breda are locked in jail. He's predicted what the Danes will do, but Alfred doesn't trust him. And it's also in this battle that the King of Wessex, who is Alfred's brother, Athelred, he dies. So then Alfred becomes king in 871 AD. Then there is the surprise attack on Chippenham, and Chippenham is Alfred's court. So if you remember from Season 1, it's the episode after when Uhtred and Leofwich have been to Cornwalham to raid, and they're in trouble, so they're fighting to the death, they're dueling to the death. And then we see all these Danes coming from under the tree line, and they surprise attack, and this actually happened. And then Alfred flees to the marshes of Somerset. Alfred regains the initiative then and defeats the Danes at the Battle of Edington in 878 AD, which is the huge battle at the end of Season 1. So we lost a few people last season. So for example, we lost Iseult, the Cornish queen, and she was of course beheaded by Scorpa, who was then skewered by Uhtred. And as well as this, we also lost Ubba, who I really liked as a character, quintessential Viking. And in the last battle, of course, we lost Leofric, who I think everyone loved a bit in their heart. So I'm very sad that we're not going to see any more Arsling comments and the connection between him and Uhtred. So what is going to happen in Season 2? Well, of course, events in the second season are going to be overshadowed by the massive battle at the end of Season 1, which was the Battle of Edington. And of course, Guthrum led his Danish army to defeat at Edington. So after the Battle of Edington, we see that Guthrum is then sort of semi-forced to convert to Christianity, and his baptismal name is then Athelstan. And this all happens after a treaty called the Treaty of Wedmore, which was between the Anglo-Saxons and between the Danes. So this also has larger consequences for the rest of the Danes. Now the army after the defeat at Edington leaves Chippenham, which is Alfred's fort, and they first go to Cirencester and then they settle in East Anglia. And the following year a Danish army overwinters in Fulham, which is near London, so there's some tension there, but then they sail off to attack the continent because Francia is particularly weak because Charles the Bold had just died, which meant there was a power vacuum. So this great heathen army then goes to the continent rather than attacking in England. Now, we then see that there is a division of land between the Saxons under Alfred and the Danes under Guthrum. Now, Guthrum rules in East Anglia, and to the north of this line we have where Danish rule is present, and to the south we have where the Wessex rule is present. And this area later becomes known as the Danelaw, this area of East Anglia, Essex and Mercia, which were ruled by the Danes. And then under that line we have the area under the hegemony of Wessex, under the hegemony of Alfred. So as far as pitched battles go in this time, there's not many that are named in the annals and in the chronicles and things like that. So I'm not sure if we're going to see any huge Eddington-sized battles this season. If we look at the time span that's covered in the last season, which was roughly from the Battle of Ashdown, I know it starts technically in 866 when he's just a boy, but I feel like that time span's a little bit larger because it cuts out his whole teenage years, when you see him coming out of the river. But if we take the same time span of roughly the 10 years, roughly the decade, which is, it's 7 years, but let's say roughly a decade, then we end in the year 890 for the end date of Season 2. And I think that will be because it's the year in which Guthrum dies, so that might be the end date of Season 2. And in Bishop Asser's writing, it mentions that the Danes break the treaty with Alfred, though we aren't told how and why they do this and what actually results. Another way the series could end is the climax at the Battle of Buttington in 893 AD, and that was actually a major battle fought against a Danish army led by a Danish warlord called Haston, though it might go in a totally different direction. These are just some guesses as to how it goes because there aren't many pitched battles in this area, although I will go on to cover what another way the show could go for Season 2 is. So how about the Saxons? Well, the Wessex, or the West Saxons, because West Sax means West Saxons, so I'll refer to them as Saxons rather than Anglo-Saxons. They've given the Danes a good hammering at Edington. Now, there is a break from constant Viking attacks after this battle because it was a really massive battle. A lot of Danes were killed, and it really made the Danes think twice about trying to invade Wessex because Alfred was clearly a man who meant business. One thing we do have to remember though is that Wessex is still pretty much surrounded by the Danes to the north and to the west. Now, as I said previously, the area south of the Thames after a failed Danish attack on Kent is then retaken by the West Saxons. So the area south of the Humber, the southeast of England, no, not the Humber, the Thames, sorry, then becomes under Saxon rule, although they are then surrounded from the west by Cornwallum, which is this Celtic kingdom. And as well, Wessex gains control over the western part of Mercia, which is this area in the Midlands from the Danelaw. So they do make progress in this region, but most of these gains are because of treaties rather than because of actual fighting. So there aren't many pitched battles, as I was saying, in this period. Although some things where the show could go into to have a bit of action and excitement would be the attack on Kent, which I just mentioned, as well as Alfred's new navy, which fought several battles. Now, the Saxons then gained control over a large area in the south, which is south of the Thames, the southeast, so the area around and to the south of London, and London becomes a border town with the Danes, which Alfred then refurbishes in this period. So that might be where we see some action in Season 2. Now as well, we have an expedition in 886, which Asa writes about. Remember, Asa is this Cornish bishop. He's a bit of a knob in the actual series, but, you know, he's very important for history because he is the one who writes this stuff down. And otherwise we really wouldn't know much about this period, so it's thanks to Bishop Asa, who was writing down everything that Alfred was doing and what was going on, that we have so much information about this period. So Alfred's navy, he actually sends it over to East Anglia, he sends it up the River Stour, and this navy was likely manned and developed by the Frisians, who are of course themselves very good sailors and maritime warriors. So they sail up the River Stour in East Anglia, where they defeat a Danish fleet and then plunder the surrounding area, although they are then caught by another Danish fleet at the mouth of the river when they're trying to escape, and they are defeated. So this might be an area where we see Uhtred going off on this mission with the navy, because I think that would be quite an Uhtred thing to do, you know, send him into the middle of the Danes and he has to fight his way out. So that might be where we see some action then. Now for the rest of the period, in sort of the extra long decade from Edington in 878 until the power vacuum which is caused by Guthrum's death in 890, is fairly uneventful. Now during this time, the Saxons do start to reorganise. They build fortresses which were called burhs, and we see it in a lot of English place names now. So for example, Bamborough ends in br because it's from Burh. We have the very famous battle of Brunanburh, also ends in Burh. And also the guy kind of third from the right looks a lot like Charles Dance in that photo. Anyway, and the Saxons reorganise, so they build these burhs often on older Roman sites which already had walls. So for example, Chester, they built a burh there, and they built them in key locations like river mouths, because of course the Vikings would try to sail down these and, you know, attack coastal towns. So Alfred built burhs there. And actually someone wouldn't be living further than 15 miles from any respective burh. So if there was then a Viking attack or, you know, a fully fledged Danish invasion attempt, people could then flee to these walled towns where the Vikings would have a much harder time, or the Danes rather, would have a much harder time besieging. So as I previously mentioned, Alfred built up a navy as well with the help from the Frisians, and he also reforms the army from a part-time militia, or the herd, to a full-time army with pay and warriors who are trained in fighting. So this of course makes it more effective and much quicker in dealing with any attacks. And as well, because of the system of burhs and because everyone lived so close to them, Alfred could then tax them. Because you've got a more centralised government, he can start seeing how many people there were. And this would help pay for his new armies and castles, and he also introduces conscription, so he can conscript men into his new army to fight off any invaders. And of course, Alfred is central to all of these changes, and he is the mastermind behind keeping the Danes out of England. Now, this isn't an easy time for Alfred either, and Uhtred, as a sort of friend/enemy at times of Alfred, will of course have to deal with this and the more personal side of Alfred as well, because it's in this period that his sister Ealhswith dies in 888 AD en route to Rome, so this will obviously affect Alfred, as well as the influential Bishop of Canterbury called Athelred. He also dies in 888, and of course there'll be some other personal scandal that the show will throw in, which will make things more interesting. Now, Uhtred is obviously the central character of The Last Kingdom, so we're going to be seeing a lot of this guy. And he's a semi-fictional character, so there's not much historically that I can say about him that I think will happen, because, well, we don't really know. He basically goes wherever the story will take him, although doubtless he's going to play a pivotal role in the next decade. So, of course, he is going to be with his sort of brother, Ragnar Ragnarsson, and he is now with his basically ex-girlfriend, who is Brida. So we're definitely going to be seeing them. And speaking of which, he's also still got his wife Mildred, who she's not very happy with him because he went off with the Cornish princess, and I think she's now a nun. So I'm not sure if she's going to make another appearance, but I'm sure she will. And speaking of women, we also have his sister, Thera, who is also the sister of Ragnar Ragnarsson. So it's possible that they go after her in this season. They go north to Northumbria, but I don't think they will. I think that's a bit soon to be wrapping up that plot point. So he's still got to go after her. And when you talk about her, we of course have to mention Kjartan, who is the one who betrayed him and his father, or Ragnar, and then also his one-eyed son, Sven. So I'm not sure if we'll see them this season. I think that's probably something we'll see in the next season or the season after that to wrap that up. And then of course we also have his treacherous uncle who betrayed him and tried to sell him into slavery. And of course Uhtred's final goal, Bebbanburg, and retaking his kingdom. But it's in the north, it's in Northumbria, so I don't think we're going to see that at all this season. I would very much doubt that. And of course, through all of this, Uhtred of course will have another Danish enemy to fight. Who that is, I'm not sure. It could be the previously mentioned Haston, who is the guy who tries to attack the West Saxons at the Battle of Buttington. So it might be Haston who is the enemy in this one, or it might be another Dane. I don't think it'll be Guthrum, because Guthrum settles down a bit in this period. But we'll wait and see who the enemy is. Alright everyone, these have been my predictions for Season 2 of The Last Kingdom. Now, as I said, I'm very excited to see how it goes, and I might make some more videos on The Last Kingdom. I might make some historical character spotlights, where I look at the characters in the show and then tell you about some of the history of it, what's true in the show about them, what's maybe a bit more exaggerated or made up, and I'll see if you enjoy them. So, thank you very much for watching. This has been, of course, History with Hilbert with some The Last Kingdom Season 2 predictions. Tell me what you thought. Do you agree with me? Have you got your own predictions? Have you got any hopes, expectations? Do you fear anything for the next season? Let me know in the comment section below. Thank you very much for watching. This has been History with Hilbert, as always, with some Last Kingdom predictions.